hour after that. If any of you want to stay with us and discuss, ask questions, we'll be able to do that via telephone. So that option is available. We'll be here for an hour and a half. I'm going to give you a little bit of background about the kind of state-of-the-art of online education in U.S. Colleges and universities today, and then we'll jump into the data. So the first slide here shows the most recent data that's available from the iPad survey, and we're delighted that the iPads folks finally added questions about online enrollment to their surveys so we can start tracking this. Now, caveat that this data is from 2012, so it's 2 years old, and the numbers will be bigger now for the 2 years worth of growth since this data was collected. But this shows you that 13% of the college students back in 2012 were enrolled in fully online degree programs, and then about double that number, 26%, were taking at least one of their classes online. So we think that today that those numbers are probably past 30, 35% for those that are taking one class. This data is a little bit different. For those of you that have tracked reports from EduVentures or the Sloan C survey that Babson does, over the years they've estimated higher numbers here. So we're glad to get the actual data from iPads. Some folks believe that the iPads data is a little bit underreported, so with those caveats, there's still a substantial number of students here. I like to make the point that over it's been about 15 years since the online option was available for students, and maybe a little bit longer than that, but in a relatively short amount of time, you have 5.5 million students taking at least one online class, and 2.6 million that are taking all of their programs online. I think that's a phenomenal accomplishment that higher education institutions from all sectors have been able to add this option for people to go to college, and it'll continue to grow. The growth rate is much faster for the online students than traditional students. Again, most of you probably know that the enrollments have been stagnant for the overall college population for the past couple of years, but the online portion continues to get bigger. I like to think about the future as the pie chart gets bigger, the gray and the green piece keeps widening over time. Where will it stop? I think that there's a group of students out there that will probably never take an online class. It just won't match their learning styles or their circumstances. Other people will probably never go back to campus. I'm guessing, based on the rate here and my experience, that eventually this will level out, that maybe 25 to 30% of students will go fully online. Another 30-35% will stay in the classroom, and then you'll have that mixture in the middle. But it'll be interesting to see over the next 5 to 10 years how this data settles out. The next slide here drills down a little bit and shows you the number of institutions, not the number of students that are offering online programs. Again, this is iPads data. It's 2 years old, and you can see here as you go down the column with the number of fully online programs that there's 438 of the four-year publics, 558 of the four-year privates, and so forth. Over 1,200 colleges and universities are offering degrees at the four-year level, and then the two-year institutions are in the bottom half of that table, and there you have about 560. So overall, almost 2,000 institutions are offering online programs. And the far right column gives you the percentages. The public universities lead the way here with about 64% offering online programs. And you can see how the data plays out. Again, we think this data may be underreported. The next slide that we're going to show you shows the results of a survey that we did about a year ago. And it was a survey of chief academic officers of both private institutions, those that are members of the Council of Independent Colleges, and public institutions, those that are members of ASU, the American Association of State Colleges and Universities. And you can see from the slide here that in that survey of chief academic officers, only 18% of the four-year institutions reported that they did not offer any online programs. The first bar there, no online programs, where about half of the private institutions indicated they didn't have any. So those numbers are bigger than the ones that are coming through iPads, and we'll see how this settles out again over time. But the big takeaway for me from these slides is that this is a major innovation. It's substantial. Many institutions are doing this. And from my experience, there are many institutions that are still debating and considering and are making that move even as we speak. Let me turn over now to my colleague Carol, and she'll walk us through some of the initial results.
Great. Thanks, Dave. I want to move on to the next slide.
The study sample is up, Carol. You can go ahead and speak to it.
Okay. Is it up? Because I don't see it. I'm sorry. Okay,
yeah,
here we go.
Audience can see it.
Okay. All right. Let me tell you about the study sample. We tried to make the sample, and I think we succeeded in making it as much like the sample we used, by the way, in our 2012 and 2013 study, so we would have comparative data. And you'll see throughout the report and some of the infographics that we're doing that we try to compare 2012, 2013, 2014. So the study sample procedures are very similar across our three annual surveys. Number one, we take 1,500 respondents drawn from a very sophisticated national research panel that is run by an organization that we've worked with for over 20 years. The sample is U.S. Census representative in terms of basic demographic data. An invitation is sent via email for their participation. They need to be 18 years of age and older. Footnote, as you remember, we always thought online learning was equal to adult learning, but you'll see from some of the data that's coming up that that is not true. So therefore, we definitely needed to include the younger set of prospective students as well. They also had to have a minimum of a high school degree or of its equivalent. And most important, because we don't study need, we don't ask people what they would like to do someday if they could online, we will only screen in those individuals who have been enrolled, are currently enrolled, or who have firm plans to enroll in a fully online undergraduate or graduate degree, certificate, or licensure program. This is a very important principle that we use and have held as a basic tenet of our market research studies, and that is we talk to recent buyers, current buyers. We don't talk to intenders unless they can tell us what they plan to study and where they plan to study. So you can have greater reliance on our data because we're not having people imagine what they might do. They have to be concrete and very descriptive of what they have done, are doing, or plan to do. Let's look at some of the demographics, which everybody tends to be quite interested in. And no news here, everybody. If you're dealing with this kind of a population, you know it's dominated. Over the years, it's been dominated by females. We once said that women are doing later what men had the opportunity to do earlier. And I think that was something we said back in the 80s, but that's no longer true. Women are in these adult programs and these post-traditional programs because, number one, they make up a larger portion of higher education in general. I think the ratio now across all education is like 55% to 45%. But also they may enter the kinds of fields where continuing education is even more important, like the social services, education, and health. So you'll see here we've made a 3-year analysis for the undergraduates, relatively stable, I would say. More than 2/3 are women. And at the graduate level, very similar. We had a little dip in 2013, but that's why we collect data over a course of the years, because in about a year or two, Dave and I think we're going to try to aggregate the data, because you can't expect exact consistency year from year. But on the whole, just slightly less female at the graduate level, but not noticeably so. So this has great implications for how you market, what you say, what makes you attractive, and so forth. Going forth, age. I'll do you a favor here. The median age is about 34. That's younger than what we've seen in ground programs or even hybrid programs. And if you'll notice, and the reason why we use 18 and over is because 17% of this population is under the age of 25. Now, we get initiatives from many institutions that say, oh, but we don't want to survey people under 25. The main campus might get a little bit, disturbed at the fact we're trying to recruit younger people into the online market, but you're way beyond that. They're already doing it. They're marching with their feet. So 17%, and then one of our studies, Dave, if I'm not mistaken, was up to 20%. So they are a viable target. Next, household income. Let me tell you, the median income is $50,000. Not very much, but it is, I think, the national median as well. That's MEDIAN. That means half are under 50 and half are over 50. Moving on, employment status. We've seen some noticeable changes here, and we wrote in the report they seem to be less full-time, and you can see that in the undergraduate proportion, moving from 48 to 38. And in the graduate proportions from 73 to 59. So something's happening out there in the job market, and I think we all realize what it is. And it's not that they're going to part-time, they're going to unemployed. You can see those unemployment numbers have risen at the undergraduate level from 27 to 39, and at the graduate level from 11 to 18. So people are, they've got more time to study. And they need to study probably to get back into that marketplace. In regard to ethnicity, no news here either. We're 70% white and 30% minority. That seems to be relatively true nationwide as we consider all post-traditional learning. And we haven't made any headway in pulling in the fair share of minority populations into online, which is something to think about given where you rest in your regional appeal and so on and so forth. Finally, I think we look at military service within some demographics, and everybody's interested in this, but about 15% of online learners have some military ties, as you can see here. So not only do we look for veterans, but their spouses and active duty military, but some of us are always curious about this. I think 6, 7, 8%, almost 10% of online learners are veterans, and we kind of understand the reason why. So that's some of the highlights of the demographics. Dave, I'm going to turn it over to you, but the report has many, many other facets of one's personality and background that may be of use to you as you create your marketing strategies.
Yeah, thanks, Carol. The next piece is about the intended credential. This is what the students were enrolling in. And the column under OCS is the Online College Student Survey. I need to point out to you that we inflated the master's degree students somewhat in our sample to make sure we had enough master's degree students or graduate students to draw valid conclusions from. And we compared it to estimates from EduVentures, and you see that it shows that the master's degree is a little bit higher. The couple points about this slide that I think are interesting. First of all, that we break out the associate's degree. 25% of these students are interested in associate's degrees. And I'm surprised at the number of four-year institutions that don't offer associate's degree. I mean, I was guilty of that. I was president of a college, a private university several years ago, and we didn't offer any associate's degree. It wasn't something that kind of fit that institution. But many of these students want an associate's degree. It's a good stepping stone, even if their ultimate goal is a bachelor's degree. And institutions that want to serve this population, I think, would be well advised to consider adding associate's degree. It takes almost no work to do that, and it provides the student that good stepping stone. The other key point here is certificates. 10% of these students were involved in certificates. In previous surveys that we've done in this series, we looked at when they go for certificates, and the undergraduate students tend to take certificates before or as part of their degree. Maybe initially they start with a certificate, then they move into a degree plan. The graduate students tend to wait until after they've got their master's degree, and then they'll maybe do certificates to top that off, to emphasize certain areas or to retrain in specific topics. So certificates to me are a great offering, and again, it doesn't require any new course development. So a great strategy is to think about an associate's degree, a certificate that would lead into a bachelor's degree, a post-bachelor's degree certificate that would be the first step towards a master's, and you would layer those certificates in between each level of the degree so students can get a recognized credential for a smaller amount of effort, and then they can keep moving up that degree ladder. The next, let's get into some of the meat of the study here about the field of study. This slide shows you the undergrad and graduate distributions in terms of what discipline they're in. And a couple of trends here, well, slight changes this year. The business is down slightly in both undergrad and graduates. It clearly continues to be the dominant, the main field, the number one field that online students want to study. But this year there was a decline in the undergraduate population in the business field, and a slight increase in a number of other fields that kind of replaced that. Health and medicine or the health fields went up a little bit, computers and IT went up a little bit. No substantial increases, but kind of a general trend there. On the graduate side, again, a little bit of a shrinkage in the business students, and the big change was education. Education came up, and again, you want to take these numbers with some care. You need to see a pretty big move before we think it's statistically valid. And as we report on this, we'll see if trends emerge from this data. The other
Dave,
thing, go ahead,
I was just going to make a point here about those STEM topics and some recent material we've been looking over. It might be there's more demand for STEM than there is supply. Many of you colleges are not offering the STEM topics online, therefore that deflates the numbers, whereas many of the jobs that are being left unfulfilled are STEM jobs. So maybe there's a great opportunity here to offer these topics where the jobs are resting with, looking for employees.
It's a very good point. You always want to be tracking and seeing where the job market is moving to develop programs. In the report itself, if you go to and download the report, you'll see more complete data in this area. We actually asked the students what their specializations were within these fields, and we tried to present some of that data in the report itself. It was difficult to get it in a slide like this, but we see that more and more institutions are adding programs, and students are taking degrees or studying in more specific fields. So I think there was over 140 different specializations or separate degrees that students were studying in this year's survey, and my view is that continues to increase, that as institutions get more experience and they grow their online programs, they start looking for the second or the third or fourth program to add, and they also start specifying or specializing more tightly, offering students more specific fields and degrees, and part of that, I think, is competition driving that. The next slide shows the 10 undergrad programs that are the largest enrollments, and again, you can see that this is dominated by professional fields when you look at the top 10, but as you get down there to the top 30, top 40, you see more fields like liberal arts and humanities and other specialized fields entering in. There were students that were majoring in architecture, interior design, a variety of fields in the study that shows you that institutions are offering a broader array and a variety of topics. The undergrad or the grad data is similar to the grad data. Business again dominates here. and business students continue to be 25% or more of the total. So number one is way ahead of whatever's in second place. But again, professional fields dominate. When you get to the graduate programs, you see that education, elementary ed administration are number 3 and 4 because they tend to attract graduate students. So we want to take a poll here and test a question about the kind of specialization trend that I think is going on in terms of what universities and colleges are offering. So if we'll take a minute here, and if you'll respond to the poll question, we'll see some variety, hopefully, in the kind of programs that you folks are offering at your institutions. So in the chat section, if you would, if any of you think you're offering unique degrees or specialty degrees, share those with us. We have a number of responses coming in. We'll tally them in just a second.
So a few of you have some really interesting ones. We have a grad certificate in animal audiology. We have ethnomusicology. Somebody is moving their School of Theology entirely online. There's a real estate specific program, a new graduate program in data analytics. So those are just some of the responses that you all provided us.
Yeah, that makes my point pretty well, that it's amazing the variety of fields that you can study online these days. And I'm pretty sure that trend is going to continue. There'll be more and more specialized fields of study.
Yes, Dave, I was going to say, it is these, what we call sometimes boutique topics or specialized topics, are ways for smaller institutions that do have specializations to get into this marketplace, because they can go all over the nation. They don't have to worry about attracting them within their driving distance, for example. I remember doing an analysis of a sustainability certificate for an institution in New England, and we went nationwide on that analysis because there weren't enough individuals probably nearby. But if you go nationwide, some of your unique topics for which individual colleges have great reputations, they can take them to a greater audience through online.
It's a great point. I mean, there's two kind of strategies here as you develop programs. One is to kind of follow the herd. Everybody should offer a business degree because there's people within your region that probably need it and want it. But if you have the faculty and the unique history or the culture at your institution, the programs that are one of a kind or comparatively slow, that's a great strategy too. Both of them in combination work. Carol, you want to go ahead on factors here?
Okay, let me move on to factors. Okay. Alrighty. We asked a question about what was important to these learners, these students in online programs, in choosing the institution which they chose. And they could choose up to 3 of a number of different options we gave them, probably 10 or 12. And I think no surprise to to all of us would be the reputation of your college or university. And that ranked almost equal to tuition and fees. We have noticed over the years, not only in our individual studies for colleges, but in our national studies and nationwide analyses, that tuition, fees, cost are extremely important. And that does rank in the top 2 here. Next in importance would be note that class meeting times, which means synchronous types of online programs will not really make it too well. And moving down the line a bit, you'll see other characteristics. But whatever you can do to improve your brand, to make notable comments about your brand and your reputation, that's all to the good of your being able to attract these online learners. And not at least important would be competitive in your tuition and fees. That's why you see so many, I think, state institutions, Dave, in this marketplace, because their tuition fees do tend to be lower than the privates. The privates, however, have to give something back if they can't charge a lower tuition and fees, and one would be more flexible scheduling. Number two could be the reputation of the institution, and so on and so forth. So you have to, tuition and fees have to be taken into consideration as a major variable in attracting them to your institution. Moving on, what determines reputation, since it's so important? Well, it always surprises me that number one comes accredited. But if you can think of the history of online education, you'll know that the for-profit sector during the last decade really commanded that marketplace. And some of those institutions weren't accredited, and there were a lot of publicity and notoriety about those non-accredited institutions and so on and so forth. So this population is very sensitive to accreditation issues. So though we don't, pronounce it loud and clear in our materials, it should be there somewhere, because many of them are looking for them, looking for accreditation validity. The next would be, are you recognized in the field I want to study as a high-quality institution? So any kind of testimonials or associations with other agencies or groups that represent that field that can speak on your behalf, namely employers, all the better. And you see these don't change too much from the undergraduate to the graduate. And of course, word of mouth, recommendations from friends, we know that always is there. And some of us think of ways to promote techniques that our former students and colleagues can use to tell others about our institution. Reputational marketing, it's called. So think of ways that you can get others to talk on your behalf. The academic standards, known to be an accredited high academic standard institution, is also important. And the rankings, which surprised me a bit with this population, but that too has some credibility here. But most important, yes, go ahead.
Excuse me, just a comment about this data. I think this illustrates a point that everybody in higher ed should think about, and that is that students don't have much of a basis to make decisions like this. Accreditation is clearly one that they can look at, but what does the student use to determine what's a high-quality program or a good program for them? I mean, there's a lot of discussion right now about ranking systems or dashboards, that the federal government may be producing. But when you think about it, students don't have a lot to go on, so they fall back on things like rankings or accreditation if my friends recommend it. There's an opportunity here, I think, for institutions to define what their reputation is and kind of develop their own standards or criteria that they can share with students.
Yes, and I think a good technique to do that from a marketing perspective is the use of testimonials from those who have graduated from your programs and the employers who hire them. Two good sources of speaking on your behalf along these various factors. Let's talk about comparing their views on comparing the online programs in which they just participated or are participating to their classroom instruction of the past. And I say we are over debating whether or not online education will work, can work, and is desirable. I think we're past that now. So if you have any faculty member who says, yes, but they don't want it, they just have to take it, and so on and so forth, there's no longer true, because we've asked these respondents to do the comparison, and across, half of them think it's better. And the other half think it's about the same. So we have made it in this field of online learning to the point where we don't have to wonder about describing online education in terms of its, its quality and its background and so on and so forth. These people have the comparison, and most of them, as you can see from that early data, have taken at least one online course. So they know, and they're judging, and they're talking with, voting with their feet. So no more is it the thing to do, that they don't want it. No, no, they want it, they seek it out, and this is what they think. Next.
Carol,
Yeah.
we have a question.
Do I have
John wants to know, what do you think about programs that are hybrid, programs that have face-to-face components as well as online?
Yeah, I think I have a slide coming up about hybrid, but let me tell you what I think about hybrid. With some of our market analyses for individual colleges, it's just the way to go because it's a large institution in a metropolitan area. It has a huge population within 10, 15 miles, and they can offer what in our studies would show slight, the preference for hybrid used to be above online, and now we're seeing it kind of, comparable. That is, if you live nearby and you can get to a campus once every 2 weeks for 3 hours, that's highly desirable on the part of some students because they like the touch and feel. But if you live 500 miles away and you still want to go to the University of Pennsylvania, you have to go online. So for nearby populations, it's a great option to offer because it gives them something of both. They get the touch and feel, and they get their online instruction, and they can combine the two. So it depends on the region that you are serving. If you're out in the middle of nowhere, I'd say, it's not going to work. But if you're in highly populated areas and you have a population that was drawn to you because of your reputation, your academic quality, and so forth, give them a chance to come on campus some of the time. The question is, how often? Many people ask us that. Is it every other week? Is it every week? Is it 3 hours or 2 hours? You have to do a little bit of market analysis in your region to find out. Generally, we find out they'd like to come every other week and stay about 3 hours. That's the pattern. But yes, hybrid works in many locations. Moving on, we said to them, did you, if the online program you enrolled in or are enrolled in was not available, would you consider classroom or hybrid low residency programs? And you'll see here that let's just look at the consideration of hybrid low residency. That's 30% would not, most likely, and another 40% we're not sure, so that's about 70%. So my conclusion here is they're generally looking for an online program, okay? Only 30% probably would look for that hybrid program. So you do have two distinct populations. You may not be talking to the same type of person. On the right-hand column, did they consider classroom programs? You get some of a similar pattern. So some people are worried in their college campuses whether they're taken away from their classroom programs, and I would say you're probably not, that this is a different medium, it's a different technique, and you're appealing to another population base.
Yeah, Carol, this is Dave. I would add to that these students are different. They're not all one size fits all kind of characteristics. In my experience, a third of the students really like the face-to-face option. A third don't want it at all. They never want to go to campus. And there's a third that would take advantage of it on occasion. And that tends to play out over and over. That this one-third, one-third, one-third. There's no
that
one
sounds just right
way to do it.
That sounds just right. That's why I say to most of our clients, it's not either or. The institution that really has it together will offer hybrid and online and some classroom.
Right.
That's for sure.
If you give the students choices, that's your best option if you can do it.
I agree. So then we went on and asked for those individuals who had begun study in a classroom setting but then moved to online, which we want to remind you that most, if not all of these people brought credits with them. It's something like 70. Dave will tell you later, but they're all bringing credits with them, and that's another point. So they've had a classroom. So the question was, why didn't you stay in the classroom? And I think these answers are fairly understandable and reasonable. Life interfered, says that 43%. Something happened and I just couldn't make it to the classroom twice a week for 2.5 hours. That was it. And the same with the personal event is a career event. I got a new job, I had to stay late, I had to travel more, etc. And so on and so forth. I moved. The cost, some people find the cost of classroom instruction is greater. You got to drive, you got to park, you got to do all these other things rather than just stay at home or at work and do your studies. And then the other reasons that you could relatively, accept and understand, and so on and so forth. But, life interferes. Maybe they would like that hybrid program, but I can't even make it once every 2 weeks. I have a travel schedule that's, unbelievable. But notice the bottom line there, quality of the instruction. That goes back to reinforce that earlier slide that, they're not wondering about the quality anymore. They're accepting it as pretty much equal, if not better.
Yes,
Dave, I think we move to you next.
Yep, comment on this particular slide. There was a lead article in the Chronicle this morning about a study that just was published on retention rates, and it was kind of sad news in a sense that retention rates have dropped in U.S. colleges and universities kind of across the board.
Oh, yeah.
And this isn't the answer, but I think it's something for institutions to think about. Life happens, students have to move or they have to change jobs, or a variety of things can happen that prevents a student from continuing on campus. You can pick up some of those students and keep them at your institution if you have online options. So it won't solve the retention issue, but I think it's an option that can clearly help because students have issues like this. This next slide is a very interesting one, proximity to the institution. We've asked this question for 3 years, and some trends are emerging. If you just look at the undergrad data, go down to the students that live more than 100 miles from campus. It's the third line down, 25% in 2012, 27% last year, and 31% this year. Kind of a slight rise there in students that are further away from campus. Now jump over to the right to the graduate students, where back in 2012, 35% were more than 100 miles away, and it goes up to 29 and then 48 this past year. There seems to be a trend emerging here that students, especially grad students, are willing to go further afield to enroll in an online program. There's still a powerful advantage to be close where you have the campus and the physical presence of the institution to emphasize the brand. But I think as more and more institutions specialize and they offer a variety of degrees, students will go a little bit further or find another institution that offers that specific degree or program that they want. So interesting trend that's emerging here.
Yeah, I think, could I say one thing about that, if you go back for a second? I think what it is saying, and particularly at the graduate level, that maybe brand, reputation, and quality might take them farther. They may go to the University of Pennsylvania and they're living in South Dakota for that graduate degree, even though there are schools right near them. I shouldn't use South Dakota. Let me use Harrisburg or Akron, Ohio. There are many, many institutions around them, but if you can get my graduate degree online from the University of Pennsylvania, I would go further. So that's something that many institutions have to confront. Because the competition is not always right nearby. We're going to get many, many prestigious institutions and highly reputable institutions entering this market, and you've got to think of unique ways of attracting, helping them keep, quote unquote, closer to home.
Mm-hmm. Good point. We asked a series of questions about transfer credit. This next slide, transfer credit is one of the the top 10 important reasons why a student selects a particular college. So we had a series of questions about this. And you can see from this data that about half of the students said that they were able to transfer most or all of their credits that they earned somewhere else to the institution. Oh, and as Carol mentioned, about 80% of these students have transfer credits that they bring with them. That sounds pretty good, but when you flip that around, about half of these students only got a few or some of their credits that were able to transfer. That's a huge barrier for students because they want to go as fast as they can to get their degree, and they don't want to waste time and effort. If they've got credits that they earn somewhere else, they want those to apply. So it's important for institutions to look at barriers that may be internal to the institution or through their policies that limit the amount of transfer credit students can bring. And sometimes it's not always policies, it's the way your degree plans are arranged that don't make it possible for a student to fit in those transfer credits. So something to think about there. This next slide shows...
We have a question about the distance. Did we define more than 100 miles? Did we ask the exact number, or did we just say more than 100 miles?
We gave them those three choices that you see there, 0 to 50, 50 to 100, or over 100. And the question also has campus or center. So some institutions have sites where they have a physical presence, that would count too.
Great.
The slide about transfer credit. So a series of questions here about how important it was to you, the amount of credit that was accepted. Could the people answer my questions quickly? How much time did it take to learn about the number of credits? And is it easy to find information on the website? Well, these are big numbers. Across the board, prospective students want to be able to find this information. So it's a good point if you're building your websites and promotional materials for online students to have this stuff front and center where they can get these answers easily, and especially where they can get the credit that they think they deserve.
It's also very important that you give them that transferability information right away. I've been to a couple institutions lately where they don't know whether they're getting credit for their prior credits until they've only registered, and in one institution they walked out of the institution halfway through the course because their credits weren't accepted. So the faster you get it to them, the better it is, because they may be considering a number of institutions along with yours.
Carrie, you want to go ahead with...
Oh, sure. Sorry. Moving on. Well, rest assured that we're doing the right thing, and they think so too, particularly at the graduate level. Was it a good financial investment? My 65% of graduate students said yes, and the other half or so, 29% said somewhat. Only 5 said not at. Only 5% said, 5 out of 100 said not at all. Was it worth your time? The same strong pattern. This is great information to use in your marketing. I don't think you have to be, and also with your faculty and administration. It's here to stay. It's proven itself, and the user likes it and thinks he or she is getting what they want. I think this is one of the most positive slides we have. Moving on. Okay, let's see. Was there a change in employment? Stephen, can you? Here we go. Sorry. Let's look at the undergraduate first. Not much change in employment. Maybe a third of them said yes. There's a variety of responses. I moved to a new full-time position, new job. But it wasn't a change in 2/3 of them did not see a change in their employment status. So maybe they were on their track of moving ahead and needed the credential to even keep up with their job. I think a lot of them weren't changing, but they were worried about losing their job because they weren't as well equipped to do what they were hired to do. So, learning to stay in place is also very important, because you could lose your job if you get out of range. At the graduate level, however, a little bit better in terms of, yes, I did change my employment. And you know that graduate students sort of stay in the same profession. They just are rising with those extra credentials. So I guess one would say in our earlier days with adult learners, we should say one of the great slogans is, come back to education and change your status in your career, but maybe they just want to advance or stay in place and with the right credentials for a changing job situation. But a changing job situation, but the nature of the work hasn't changed. So we're going to take another poll. Go ahead.
Carol, we have a question. Is it a good investment for the college to have online students by reducing classroom use, freeing up parking, etc.?
Is it a good to have colleges do what?
Is it a good investment for the college to have online students because it reduces classroom use or frees up parking, other resources?
Well, I should think so. What we're seeing now is the online charges for fees are about the same as classroom, and yet, you know, imagine, you know, a lot of less responsibilities in terms of maintenance, building care, parking, food, activities, if that matters. Sure, I should think that those who have entered that field loud and clear will say it is economical for the institution overall.
Great.
Is that okay? Let's take a poll because my next slide needs to find out how you would respond to this. How long does it take, typically, your institution, from the time you get an inquiry to enrollment? So I think we have a way of getting your responses over here.
Yep, just respond via the chat room, and the data is coming in now. We can see it filling up.
Okay, good, good. Because this will be from your perspective, and I'll shortly give you the slide that tells you how long it takes them. Do we have any conclusion yet?
Almost.
Okay.
Okay, so it looks like 19% of you say it takes between 5 and 8 weeks, 15% say it's less than 4 weeks, 8% between 9 and 12 weeks, and then 6% 3 to 6 months, and 4% 7 to 9 months.
Wow, that's a lot better than I would have guessed. How about you, Dave?
Yeah, I'm pleased. Those are good numbers, folks.
So let's show you in the next slide what the user says. Can you get me? Okay, we're moving. Okay, so we said to these learners, these online learners, how long did it take from the time you began to search to enrollment? 1/2, say 4 weeks. That's a huge turnaround. I think it beats your numbers on the poll. And if you take under 8 weeks, it's like 70%. These are moving targets, let me tell you. They want quick answers. They want to know transfer credit receptance. They want to know, what financial aid they're getting. They want to know the schedules, and they're ready to move. I don't think they're impulsive buyers. I think they've thought about it a while, and they are ready. So I think some of you, what percent would need to do things a little bit faster? I don't have those numbers in front of me to meet that 8 weeks or less. How many of our population responded 8 weeks or less?
Hold on, please. I will tell you. 19%, and then it said between 5 and 8 weeks, and 15% said less than 4 weeks.
So that's a lot less. That's about 30% compared to 70. So you know that the for-profits with whom you're competing, however, less so every day, since you all now have, although I think we may have a for-profit online or not, but the not-for-profits have the majority share of online learners today, and that changed about a couple of years ago. But they're very assertive, they're very responsive, the for-profit institutions. I mean, they'll get an inquiry and they'll be on their phones and email within a half an hour. So they're still in that marketplace, so you have to, I think most of you have to move even faster. And at the graduate level, they take a little bit more time, but they're graduate students, right? They're a little bit more contemplative, but not much, 60% in less than 8 weeks. From the time they search to the time they enroll. I think that's phenomenal. So it's a message to you all and the institutions, you got to speed it up a bit. Even if you need to outsource some of this work, you need to speed it up a bit, because they're lost customers once they can't reach you or you don't reach them, they're on to the next school. Okay.
This next slide is, I think, fascinating. We asked a series of questions this year for the first time about which marketing messages were appealing to students. We gave them 20-some different options in different arrays. Far and away, the number one answer, this marketing message that was appealing to the student was 90% job placement rate. And then you can see the result there: earn your degree in a year, study at your own pace, the factors that appeal to these students. But there's no close second. I'd like to offer more messages and see next year when we do this survey if there's different messages that pop up like this. I think this harkens back to the earlier slide where we were talking about reputation. How does a student know that an institution is a good institution, has a strong reputation? Institutions that can start sharing results or outcomes, I think, will have a major advantage there, and they can build their reputation around that. I'm surprised at the number of university people that I work with that don't know what their placement rate is. It's not a major issue on their campus. But if you're able to calculate job placement, there's other outcomes that I think would be worth messaging or talking to students about too, and that could be a retention rate. How many of your students graduate on time? So as it becomes more competitive and there's more and more institutions with more and more specialized programs, I believe that the institutions that can talk about their outcomes, like placement rates and so forth, will have a big advantage, and that will be a way to attract students. We also asked some questions about the application process. This next slide shows the institutions that require transcripts, standardized test scores, or even essays. And each one of these, as you add more layers to the application process, becomes a barrier to students. There's valid reasons why you want to have standardized tests and why you want to have perhaps essays, but it's important that you explain those to the students and you check and see if your competition is doing similar things. If you have many more hoops or steps for students to go through to apply than an institution that you're competing with the same program in the same region, it's going to be a barrier for entrance. So you want to make sure that those application steps are valid and reasonable and it's something that you need. This next slide shows where these students are getting sources of funding for their education. It's no surprise that student loans is number one, especially for the undergraduate students. I'm always interested that about a fifth of these students, 20%, are planning on using their own money. So they don't need, that's the green piece of the pie, they don't need funds from the government or other sources. And always when you look at the graduate students, you see that a couple of categories there, like employer assistance and scholarships and so forth, are helpful for these students. So the more you can keep your price in line, because price is the key driver, and the more you can offer students aid, the better it will be for them. We're going to do another poll here. Interesting question about cost. How do you, on your website or on your marketing materials or in your application, how do you present cost? You give a per credit, a per course, or a total cost of the degree in your materials? So if you would respond there, we'll give you the results and then show you what these students want to see. Give you just a minute to pick one of your three choices there. Thank you. That's a lot of responses. Far and away, the number one choice is per credit. And so now we'll show you what the students want to see. Per credit is actually the least of the three. It's close to per course, and then total cost is number one here. So it's good information to think about how do you convey cost and tuition to your students. Part of the problem we all know with giving a total degree cost is that you can't factor in transfer credit, because the total price of the degree may not be what a student pays depending on transfer credit. But it's good information to think about, and if you can present it in all three ways, I think that would be most helpful for students as they make a choice. Final question, final piece of information we'll share with you is the question about, did you pick the least expensive institution? And you can see from the data here that the undergraduates, about a third of them took the cheapest. Grad students, only about a fifth of them took the cheapest. But the point is, from this slide, that they're not necessarily, even though price is an important driver, quality or reputation is an important driver as well. And they're going to want to look at both of those factors. You can establish a good reputation, good value. That's going to go a long ways with these students. They're not necessarily looking for the cheapest one. Carol, final comments?
No, I just think that this segment of higher education has no way to go but up. I agree with you. It's not it's not going to dominate probably the scene, but it's certainly a worthwhile enterprise on the parts of most colleges. I think you can't ignore it. It's like evening instruction back in the 80s and 70s. I mean, we needed to do that to bring in that part-time working professional. There's no doubt that online education is here to stay, and we just need to move on with it.
We're going to show you this last slide. It's Carol's and my contact information, and if you want to download a copy of the slide deck or a copy of the full report, you can go to the learninghouse.com website and see the full written text. As I mentioned at the beginning, Carol and I are going to stay with us. Our hour that we scheduled this for is up. If you would like to stay and ask questions, we're going to open the phone lines now so you can ask a question with audio, and we'll be happy to stay until everybody's ready to go. So, who's got a question that they'd like to share with us?
We have a few people who've been waiting patiently. Before we get into the questions, I do want to remind everybody that we will be emailing out the slides and that a recording is going to be available on our website. So if you missed anything or want to refer back to the slides, you will have access to that.
Great.
So our first question is, do you have any recommendations for getting online students involved or creating a sense of community for them?
Carol, do you want to respond to that one?
No, I'm not ready to do that. You go first, Dave.
So creating a sense of community, it's one of the things is to have staff members that stay with your online students. And many of the partner institutions that we work with at the Learning House have what we call success coaches or personal advisors. Some call it a concierge service. But we highly recommend that institutions have dedicated staff that are there to do a variety of things for the students. Sometimes it's helping with registration for classes. Sometimes it's helping with personal issues. Sometimes it's motivational issues. There's time management questions that come up. There's information about the university. But a dedicated staff member to support your online students kind of replaces that staff on campus where students can go to the counseling center or go to the advising center or go to the student center for help. You can do that in an online environment, and that helps create a sense of community. In the partners that we work with, that advisor or success coach stays with the student from start to finish. The student may have different faculty members, but they have a long-term lasting relationship with that success coach. And it goes a long way to creating a sense of community. The second thing I would say is it really has to do with the faculty. The faculty have the most influence in this regard. And good quality teaching is different online than it is face-to-face. You'll find some people that aren't very effective face-to-face. They can be wonderful online and vice versa. But faculty members that are responsive and supportive and encouraging to their students makes a big difference. So those are the two key factors, I think.
Yeah. I could add a couple of other ideas. As you saw in some of our slides, we mentioned low residence programs. And these can be as subtle as a weekend a year, or, you know, several times a year, but that is one way colleges have overcome the distance feelings, and that is to offer a time when the students can come to the campus together at certain times of the year for additional instruction, to get together, to work in teams, and so forth. So low residence helps that. The other thing I thought of was, I know some online institutions have work groups and work teams, but they're quite controversial because not everybody is available at the same time to get into a chat or to get connected. So those have to be used with care because of the time restrictions on the parts of individual members.
Yeah, I'm thinking one final comment here. There can be some wonderful community created in online classes. I recall from my experience when I worked at a fully online university that we had several weddings that started in an online classroom, and people got to meet each other, and they got married even though they didn't live in the same part of the world. So you can create a really vibrant, wonderful community online, but it takes effort in some of those features to do that.
Right.
We are going to let Dale speak on the telephone. Dale, you are unmuted and you should be able to ask your question.
Oh, yeah. We currently operate in our own state and 2 other states, but we're looking into offering our program beyond the tri-state area that we're operating out of. And we're realizing that each state has their own regulations, their own processes. Some are very complicated, some are quite relatively simple, and I was just wondering where you see that going. Would there ever be some kind of federal regulation about online programs operating in other states other than their own to make the process consistent, or will it remain a state-by-state factor?
Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, my view is that it's going to always be a states' right issue. And the federal government has weighed in a couple times trying to develop guidelines for this, and they keep backing off. But the current law is that you have to follow the regulations in the states, and different states interpret that differently. Some, if you have a student or if you have a physical presence or if you're recruiting, they may apply that differently. There is some good news, though. There's a couple of efforts underway to create a compact that multiple states would join, so they would have reciprocity. And there's good work being done. I hope within this next year we may see some of these, 1 or 2 of these compacts come to fruition, where if you go through the process in one state, it may apply to 15 or 20 or 35 states. That would be a great way to deal with this. And there's a couple organizations that are working to make that happen.
Thank you.
Yeah, but right now you're on your own. You got to go all 50 states, and it can get expensive.
We have a question from Kathy. Kathy is now able to speak, so go ahead and ask your question. She wanted to know if we had any data or recommendations for international marketing.
Carol?
Well, there is a portal called universitiesabroad.com, and it gets several thousand, hits a month or so. You might look at that as a way to advertise your program, universitiesabroad.com.
I would say that there are some institutions that do very well and have established programs where they recruit international students for online programs. But it's a specialized area that's difficult to work in, and there's lots of barriers. So it's not an easy place. It's not going to be a quick fix to your enrollment needs if that's a concern. But it can be done if you're willing to spend the time and effort to build the expertise to do that.
Yeah, I think it'll be a growing market in the near future, but it'll be a little bit challenging right now.
We have a question from Erica. Last year, this study showed 9 million students taking at least one online course, and this year it was 5.5 million. Does that mean there has been a significant drop in just 1 year?
Great question. Somebody's really paying attention to
this. Okay, Dave, take it. I know this question.
I kind of referred to this at the beginning when we showed that slide. Our data last year was based on the Babson-Sloan survey, which is an annual survey that's been going for 12 years, and that was their estimates that they were, and so we used their data. This year, we have IPEDS data, the data from the Department of Education that every college responds to their survey. So we think, and the folks at Babson that do the other survey think that the IPEDS data is the most accurate, that we should use it. Having said that, a lot of people think that the IPEDS data is underreported, that it doesn't capture exactly what's going on, and it's 2 years old. So
yeah, I agree. I think I've seen percentages up to 45% of college students, at least one college students taking at least one online course. We're well into the 30s. There's no doubt about that. And you can look at your own institutions. What we have found out in working with you all is that when you offer an online course to traditional age students, they dash to them. They get filled up so quickly. So it's a high demand area, so the traditional parts of your institutions have to take care. And what many of you have done is limit the number of online courses those students can take, which is kind of funny, but I can see why. We can't charge the tuition we do and have students go, to any extent online. But, they'll vote with their feet, and so we have to do it to some extent. I'd say the safer statistic is probably closer to 35–40% of all college students taking at least one online course.
Erica has a follow-up question. She says, as long as we were comparing 2013 to 2014, last year there were 15% of public universities offering 5 or more online programs, and this year it jumped to 48%.
I'm not sure where you're getting that data from when you said last year. We didn't ask that question in last year's survey. We did a separate survey at Learning House where we surveyed ASCU institutions and CIC institutions. So, Eric, maybe we want to take this offline. If you want to call me or drop me an email, I'll clarify for you.
We also have a question. Do you have any recommendations, overall recommendations for institutions based on the data from this report?
Ooh, overall.
Yeah, I have a few off the top of my head. I'd say for those institutions which are known as local institutions and may not have a national brand, start in your immediate vicinity. Take, the state, and if you're in New England, take the New England state. Start smaller than larger, where you have identity, where you can deliver services if need be, where the population would know you to some extent, where you can use alumni, where employers understand who you are. So one bit of advice is I'd start closer than farther away. Number 2, we've asked it in prior surveys, but don't offer 15 to 16-week traditional length courses. They just don't work in this market. Anything over 10 weeks is not desirable and would not be a benefit to you in attracting people to your place. Dave, do you want to take on any other ideas for advice about what to do to get a larger share of the market?
Yeah, one thing I would point out from this year's data is that information about appealing messages, where a high placement rate was very appealing to these students. I think that for the past 15 years, as the online environment has grown, there's been one marketing message almost exclusively. It's convenient. We're flexible. You can study in your pajamas. That message is out there, and I think it's sunk in. And as the competition is increasing, it no longer works. It doesn't differentiate you from anybody else unless you have some specialized programs that other people don't offer. Okay. So thinking more about outcomes and what is your placement rate, what is your retention rate. Even more important for me as the Chief Academic Officer is what is your learning rate. Can you document student learning? And that may not be easy for many institutions. You may have to work at actually getting that data, tracking it, and reporting it. But I think institutions that can really brag about or comment on, talk about their outcomes that are meaningful, you can separate and differentiate yourself, number one, because you offer a good service to students, and number two, because you can show them the numbers.
Right.
So that'd be a big takeaway.
Another thing I would highly recommend is that you get a reasonable marketing budget. You can't do this on a shoestring. If you remember the days of continuing education in the 70s and 80s, where you were, given very little to market programs and expected to bring in big revenue, you've got heavy competition out there. We would recommend 10 to 12% of revenue spent on marketing. Typically, when I approach a college, if you look at it, they're spending 2, 3, 4%, and the competition is spending far more. The for-profits spend 30%. The highly competitive institutions are spending 15%. If you could get 8 to 10, that's probably will get you a good place in the marketplace, especially if you do it regionally where you have more visibility. You have to remember that every one of these students that comes to your shop will spend 20, 30, 40,000, depending on whether you're public or private. And so many of the times when we look at a school's budget, you're spending $300, $400, $500 for every student you want to bring in. So think of how many students you need a year. If it's 1,000, how much money is it going to take to bring in 1,000 students who will bring back to the institution? What's the return on investment, which will be $20, $30, $40,000, if not more, and get the resources you need to market effectively, because it's a highly competitive market.
Tom wants to know, given the increasing popularity of online learning, what have been some of the key events that have contributed to this rise? What are some of the trends that you all have been able to identify?
Well, the fact that half of all college students don't finish in 5 years is a good reason why. Half of all college students do not finish in 4 or 5 years. What happens? And that's why we're getting the younger population into online education, by the way. What happens to that 50%? They get out. They get out at 20, 21, 22. They start working for several years. They get to be 26, 27, 28, and they say to themselves, if I don't get that degree shortly, I'll be dead in this career line. So they come back, and meanwhile, they've been out there as working adults, have a job, they don't want to quit, they've just gotten married, they're beginning to have children. How else are they going to do this? It's a highly appealing way of coping with multiple life responsibilities, as was evening instruction and weekend instruction back in the 80s. So we had very busy people. They want to get it over with. They love, by the way, another thing to remember is they like back-to-back learning. They would like to, they don't think of May, June, and July as times, or August to take off or to give back to December or January. What is very effective is short terms back-to-back over the course of the year. Many institutions are running 8-week courses over 6 terms covering 48 weeks. They want to get it over with. They don't think summer is a time to think about things or find a job. They have a job. So not only the shortening of the weeks, but the back-to-back instruction and the better budgets for alerting them to what you have that nobody else has, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, this is Dave. I would piggyback on that. Clearly, 20 years ago, when online learning, quote, was invented, there was this huge pent-up demand, many adults that needed and wanted a college degree, but they just couldn't go to a campus to get one, 3 nights a week or whatever. So when the online option came along, they were inundated colleges and universities that offered those programs. So one was just a demographic trend that it happened. I'd say there's a second trend that kind of goes along with that, though, that shows this growth, and that's the developments in technology. I'm amazed at the better tools that are out there now, so you can do video and audio and one-on-one communication, and the whole field of adaptive learning, whether you like that phrase or not. People are building programs that students can focus on what they need to learn and not waste their time on other exercises. Yeah. And the question earlier about building community, the technology really facilitates community. When you can see people and talk to them and hear them in real time, or find out if they're on if they're studying at the same time you are, so you can light it up with them. The technology continues to drive this and make it more and more viable, which is why you see, I think, a number of traditional age students that would rather stay in the dorm room or stay in their apartment but go to class online. The technology really works for them too. So those two trends are really driving this, and the demographic trend is out there. There's still millions of people that need and want a college education. The technology keeps changing though, and it's going to make it easier and easier and better, I think.
I got two other reasons. If any of you have children or grandchildren, just look at what they're doing daily. I think it's now most high school students take at least one online course, and plus they're always on their iPads or phones or whatever. Well, what do you think in 10 years it's going to be like when they get to college? I mean, they're going to want technology, and they're going to want good, effective ways of learning. Second, the college-going population is changing. I mean, we're going to be 25% Hispanic, or is it a third Hispanic by 2020? We have many more minority students coming in, and they may not be acting like many of us did, or I did, or Dave did back in earlier years, where we packed our bag, went off to a campus, stayed 4 years, and graduated. That's not happening. And what they want in the new generation of college-going students is more flexibility. In fact, you know, we say the children are acting like adults. They want flexibility, they want convenience, they want to work as they study, they're supporting families, and so on and so forth. So we're getting a different population of individuals coming up the ranks as well, which forces more the technology issue.
We have one more question. How can play be built into online teaching, particularly as new applications are coming into play with new technology?
How can
what?
How can play be built into online teaching?
Play?
Yeah. You know, that's a great question. Yeah, I've read a couple books about gaming and the potential for games, you know, massive online games and so forth to enhance education. So there's lots of answers to that question. You have very sophisticated games and simulations that create whole new worlds that can be a really effective teaching and really motivating for students, all the way down to a faculty member doing a simple game, you know, that they can build on their own within their classroom. But so there's lots of ways you can do that depending on kind of your budget and the expertise of the faculty and the instructional designers that work with them. But it's obvious that games work and that they're very motivating to lots of people and that they can have a big influence. So again, I think as the technology improves and we get easier, cheaper access to better and better technology, it'll make games more and more prevalent and available, I would hope. Carol, do you have a comment?
No, I'm not into that. I don't know much about it.
Mm-hmm. So we've exhausted all the questions, and we're past our appointed time, the extra time there. Thank you very much for your interest. Thank you for participating today. We appreciate your questions. And if you have further comments or questions, Carol and I are both more than happy to respond to email or even have a phone call. Mm-hmm. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day and keep teaching those distant learners.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.